Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Tallon. I'm a storyteller helping people make an impact through illustration, creative coaching, writing, and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness. And now I bring my 20 years experience to you, the listener, through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. Through interviews with thought leaders in and beyond the creative industry and personal inquiry, I'm here to help you maximise the human in your creativity to thrive in the age of automation. The show has been supported from day one by Illustration X, a leading illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. Foilco, suppliers of the world's widest range of stamping foil shades and finishes to the print industry. Foilco were the very first foil company to set up a foil recovery scheme and be certified as zero foil to landfill compliant. Paradiso Institute is a non-profit cultural organisation built around a simple idea: creative lives require responsibility. Leadership and endurance and care for the body and mind shape the work more than talent ever will. They bring together people across borders and generations who are willing to commit to depth and long-term contribution. They value real encounters, shared experience, and giving back to the communities that formed them. Their attention stays on the work that holds over time. And please head to ui.org.ua to see the work of the Ukrainian Institute, who need your help to amplify the voices of the brave Ukrainian creative community during this brutal time of war. The music for the show, as ever, is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. For creativity resources for all budgets, from one-to-one and group coaching with me, to the reading list, podcast archive and creativity diary, head to thecreativecondition.com.
There's always this rotating group coming in and out, and you're always getting fresh perspective, the new ideas, and people that, want to shape things in certain ways. And it's always interesting and exciting to see, how that sort of shapes the fabric of what AIGA is for the community, and, how we're showing up, where we're showing up, who's in the room. Right. And we always try to get as many people in the room as possible from, as many backgrounds as possible. It's really, we try to avoid this idea of, design for designers, right? Because design is so much bigger. It's a conversation about culture, really.
Today I'm joined by Justin Wong, the new president of AIGA New York, as we talk about community, getting people in a room and letting things happen. Justin has his own wonderful design career under his belt, and as he continues to develop that, he's also steering the future of our industry. Originally known as the American Institute of Graphic Arts, AIGA is now the professional association for design in New York with its own ecosystem, but with a reach far beyond that, and we're going to be getting into all those themes today. This is The Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? Welcome to the show. I am Ben Tallon, the founder of The Creative Condition, host of the Creative Condition podcast for over 11 years now, championing human creativity in an automated world and hopefully helping you guys to evolve, to elevate your game, to contribute to the elevation of creativity in our society at large, which is a lifelong cause of mine. I'm doing that with the support of the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X, that I mentioned at the top there, with Foilco, with Paradiso Institute, and with the Ukrainian Institute. I'm backed by some wonderful contributors to our beautiful industry, and I'm very excited to bring you Justin Wong today. I hope you've been well. I hope you're dealing with the heat waves out there well, guys. It's scary times. It's important to strengthen those thought processes, to find the cause, to find your story, to find your optimism. I hope that you're in that place, because as you'll know if you're a long-term listener to the show, I've been through my own turbulent periods. In the last few years, I like to stay open, I like to stay honest and vulnerable about that and talk about it because I know it helps others. Thank you if you've sent feedback, by the way. I've had some beautiful feedback from many people, just checking in, checking that I'm well, but also just sharing some of their thoughts too, because we're all going through it. We're a sensitive bunch. We give a shit. We care in this industry. And I think the downside of that and our powerful imaginations is that we're also able to imagine the dark side and project, and it often sends us into these little wormholes of despair, doesn't it? And it's tough. And one way out of that, of course, is community, is to get together under the same roof with people who are both like-minded and different to ourselves, so we can have invigorating, illuminating conversations and share our creativity, our thoughts, our ideas, and leave just with our tails up, because that's what it does. For anyone who's ever been to Paradiso, been to any of the big design festivals out there, you'll know what that feels like when you come away and you just have to go and create. It's the same feeling when you've watched a film, when you've had a good holiday, when you've read a good piece of writing, when you've seen a good piece of art in a museum or anywhere else. It really does just spark something that's vital for creating. So Justin and I are going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about what AIGA is about. So their mission here on the website, which you can see at aigany.org, is fantastic. Let's have a look. Let's see what they're up to. So we've got the mission: championing the future of design for all. Justin became the president of this recently, by the way. Incredible designer in his own right, real track record. Look up his work. And he now brings a mind that we're going to delve into today to AIGA to bring people together. They have one permanent member of staff, but 30-odd voluntary contributors who make it work. They're organising and advocating for New York City designers. The full value of design can only be realised when all people can participate. And to create that future, we must build it together. AIGA New York will work towards this necessary change by facilitating conversations, creating spaces and building platforms for the New York City design community. Their pillars are the community, elevate a diverse range of voices within the New York design community. The work, celebrate world-class design made in New York. The future of the industry, advocate for industry standards that creates a fairer environment for all. This mission was developed and ratified by the 2020-2021 AIGA New York Board of Directors. So it's incredible. I love the project. I love the idea. I wanted to talk to Justin about how do we make these kind of organisations like DNAD, AIGA work in our current moment when everything's so kind of decentralised and scattered across the internet, across the world, as we're all working in our gardens and our agencies and whatever else. Fascinating chat. I hope you're going to get a lot from it. And you might be thinking, okay, what's New York got to do with me? But I think we know by now, don't we, the power of these kind of hubs like London and New York and Barcelona and, any other city you care to name in the world where there's a cool scene going on. I think it ripples across the globe, especially with the awareness we have through our connected digital world now. So I hope you're going to enjoy the conversation. If you want to work with me directly on the coaching front, I have a story coach. I have a philosophy, affectionate curiosity. I want to hear every aspect of your story and I want to help you realign things, get back on the right path for you. I have a pit stop, one-to-one, one-off session. We can work together on a session-by-session basis, or we can jump into a 6-month or a 12-month program with specific goals to get you where you want to go. I will elevate your game, or can help you to write your book, tell your story, become aware of your story just for yourself so you can become the author of the life you want to live, which is what I'm talking about in next week's episode. Hit me up, ben@bentallon.com, or head to thecreativecondition.com for all the information. And without further ado, let's get to this conversation with Justin Wong.
I mean, I grew up in the city and there was always so much culture around. But like when I was very young, I was just kind of like every other kid, finger painting. I did an interview recently where they asked me what my favorite, um, early memory was of being creative. And I legitimately remember just like finger painting. And I had mixed together a bunch of colors into this like light beige color. And I thought it was so incredible. I was like trying to show everybody. I was like, oh my God, look at this color that I myself invented because, it didn't look like any of the bright colors that were in the tubes. And I must have been like 2 or 3. So, those kinds of discoveries like were very exciting for me creatively as a kid. And then, of course, I was always drawing and going into school. I guess I never really thought about, um, art as a career necessarily. I think a couple of times, like someone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I kind of just went through every possible. I was like, oh, I want to be a chef or I want to be an artist. I remember one time maybe I wanted to, do ceramics. I was like, I loved the idea of a pottery wheel. And I thought that was something that, I just wanted to do forever. I had never made a pot before. I had never touched any clay, but I was like, it looks so cool. Um, and then by the time I get to, middle school, I'm applying to high school, things got really serious. I was very academic. Right. So I was, A+ student and everything. I went to Catholic school and, it was very serious. They told me, oh, we know you're going to go on and you're going to be an open heart surgeon or something, or you're going to be a, big lawyer, which was very exciting to my family. Uh, and then I, and then I go to high school. And in high school, I had actually an art teacher who had, earlier in her career been an art director. And she kind of introduced to me this idea that design was a career path, right? To me, in high school, design was a thing that you did for your cousin's band, right? You made the posters and they would hang it up and, you got paid $50 for it and that was it. It wasn't like a career necessarily, because I guess I didn't really think about all of the design that was out there in the world at this point. So I was in, I did a couple of art classes every year. And eventually it was, I don't know, close to junior year. And she asked me, oh, which art schools are you applying to? And I was like, oh, like, I hadn't really thought about applying to art school at all. She goes, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. I was thinking I might, be a dentist or something. And she looked at me and she was like, you're kidding, right? I was like, no, I'm pretty serious, I think. Seems like a helpful and, you know, respectable thing to do. And she said basically, look, you have real talent, right? There's a lot of dentists out there in the world, but there's not a lot of what you have. Right. And it would be a waste if you were to, ignore your passion and the things that excite you to do something just because other people tell you, it's what you should be doing. So, she told me to think about it and I was like, okay, I guess, I'll apply, whatever. What's the harm? And then I ended up applying to a bunch of art schools. In New York, there's so many. Um, Ended up deciding to go to the School of Visual Arts, which actually was quite close to where I grew up. I make this joke that my entire school career in New York City fits within like 1 square mile. It's like a Bermuda Triangle of academia. Um, but they're very, it was fun. It was the city as your campus situation. And I dual majored in advertising and design there and really discovered what it was to be a designer.
That's really interesting to me, and this is a consistency I've found now, having done this for about 10 years, and I've worked as an illustrator for nearly 20 years now, and all of these people that I've met, all these magic people who make this industry so beautiful to me, there's this common thread that there's almost an accidental mentor in our paths. Where it doesn't matter whether it's a passing comment. For some people, it's as simple as, so I coached this one guy in Los Angeles, and he's a motion designer, and he talks about people on his brother's bricklaying site. So he was from a very poor family. He worked construction before school, supermarket after school, just to save up the money to go to his design college. And someone said to him, look, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? And they sort of knew the answer was no. And they said, well, get out there and do it. It's like, make it happen. But even things like that are really pivotal, I think. And it kind of both illuminates me because that's wonderful, but it also saddens me because I think of all those people who don't encounter their accidental mentor. And my question there, then, to bring this around to AIGA is, do organizations like this have a role to play in almost, I don't know, shining the spotlight on this industry? Because I just think there's so much potential in so many humans. We're all naturally creative, but so many of us never find this path that we have managed to find.
Yeah, that's a conversation we're having a lot actually, because a lot of our work, historically has been geared at emerging designers. So, right? So people that had already discovered that they were into design, they've already gone to a design school. But what we're finding really is that there are a lot of people that, are actually career changers, right? Later in their careers. Like they decide, oh, I didn't want to go into electrical engineering. I really wanted to be an illustrator, or I really wanted to do graphic design. And so we, are starting to put together resources and education to sort of help them along that journey, to provide pathways for them to enter the field without having to, go back to design school, 20 years into their careers. And then also on the other end, we see a lot of, middle schoolers, high schoolers that are, in this very stressful, moment of their lives where everybody in their world is telling them, okay, now's the time. You have to start figuring out what you want to do for the next 50 years, right? And so we're putting also together a lot of partnerships with high schools so that we're able to showcase, with our community, with our stakeholders and partners, what design is really fundamentally in a way that um, excites, younger audiences and taps into their existing interests. Because I think for the most part, this generation is already far more, you know, accustomed to seeing design and recognizing it. And especially now in this era of AI, they have opinions on it. And, to turn that into a career is something that is, you know, more acceptable now than it was obviously when I was starting, right? So we're really kind of there to support them as they discover design and as they go into the, you know, locking into college phase. And that's something we're really excited about.
It is very exciting, and I find that there's something wonderful also about people who are coming maybe sideways into our world, and they're going to bring different sensibilities, different points of view, unique experiences from other industries and experiences in life. I've always taken great pleasure in interviewing far and wide on this show. I like to find a balance between people in the creative industries, but also, I've had chemical engineers in renewable energy, and I'm just fascinated by creativity in its broadest sense.
Yes,
And I think there's so much design thinking that happens in those kind of industries. And if we can make bridges between those places, then I think we have far better chance of contributing, to the cultural conversation actually that I pulled. There was a reference in your notes about shaping cultural conversations. I think that's kind of how we do it. Like you say, it's not about sending it back to the start, snakes and ladders style. It's almost what can you bring and what can we give you to form this marriage.
for sure. We did actually a portfolio review last year, and we had a lot of design students as well, of course, but we had one person who came in and had worked, I think, 15 years in textiles. And you could really see the influence of how, that practice informed the style of graphic design that they developed. Everything was very intricate. There was sort of a woven feel to it. And it's like, wow, that's really interesting to us to see and experience. Um, and I think those types of experiences just kind of enrich your practice even more, right? Some people might think, oh, I've done this for too long. I can't. I think all kinds of lived experiences go into, the work that you produce as a designer, right? Maybe you have backgrounds in, I mean, I did theater a lot growing up. And so that, certainly influences the way that I work as a designer. So much of our practice comes from our backgrounds, right? As diverse as they may be, as far into your career as you may be. I mentioned the person that had done the textiles. I did theater, and that really informs the way that I operate as a designer organizationally, certainly in terms of communication. Design is so much more than just kind of, what you know, push your pixels on your computer, right? And I think having experiences and having, cultural depth and experiencing a lot of things just kind of enriches your practice as a creative.
I think so. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that we're at this almost a tension point right now. In as much as we hear this phrase, the sea of same, and we have automation, and then everyone has all these tools that make things very convenient, very easy if you want moderate work, if you want average passable stuff. But then on the other side of it, we have so much. I'm seeing a real shift in social psychology, whether that's around the well-being sphere, around uh, cultural heritage, all these amazing things that bring depth to good design at the moment. Where do you know? How do you feel about that? And what is it about you that wanted to, first of all, take this role? And secondly, what do you want from the role in that regard? Because it's safe to, I imagine it's safe to say that we believe in the power of visual communication and creativity in the broader world. As a young man, I used to be very rah rah, activism posters. It was very surface level. I think the shift now, as someone in his early 40s, is I see it woven into the fabric of our society and the deeper conversations on every level. Is that how do you feel on that in that regard?
I mean, 100%. I think, I'm obviously very passionate about visual communication, and I think that the people that are really showing up and really shaping the industry and really, making work that inspires people, that moves people, are, in it with a passion, right? To do something, to really, work at it and noodle and push and pull and find, kind of breakthroughs that are exciting and that don't look like everything else that's out there and have real conceptual depth. Um, that there's a strategy behind it, that there's a reason for making all of the choices that they do. I think that's what separates, a good designer from a really great one.
Is that something you practiced in your own journey as a designer before coming to? By the way, am I saying it right? AIGA.
Yeah, AIGA. We
Yeah.
do actually have regionally, some people call it AIGA,
Well, I was
which we think
wondering
is
that.
very
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, particularly at the Parsons School of Design, they call it AIGA, and we told them it was like it's just AIGA, and then they went back to their student. They're like, oh my God, we've been saying it wrong. It's like, I mean, it's not wrong, but it's not traditionally how we've said it. Um, but yeah, so you know, I studied advertising and design when I was, coming up. So the idea of, having strong concepts was very important for me, uh, from when I started, basically, and then I went into advertising, and so it was all kind of jumbled together and, different disciplines. And now that I'm, working with AIGA, we strive to kind of incorporate a lot of these multidisciplinary um, you know, fields into our programming so that, people have the opportunity to see the process, right? To see where ideas come from, what types of things inspire different types of people, how that translates into the work, right? We have people from all different types of, we do packaging design and branding design and interactive design and motion design and all of these different fields, and they're all interested in different things. And the sources for different projects and the inspirations all come from different areas. So we want to really put all of these resources out there for the community to be able to look and diversify and widen their horizons in terms of um, reference materials and just kind of training the way that they think about design.
You're absolutely right because this goes back to the sea of same thing, doesn't it? If we consider that very linear interpretation of design as in the end result only, then
Mhm.
okay, there's some people maybe just need that. But I think really the joy in all of it, you spoke of all those disciplines there. I to this day I love marauding in disciplines where I don't really belong because I know that I will bring a different sensibility. I like to just go and find out what's going on over there and ask questions and bring something new. And I really think that that's where great design comes from. I look at people. I was fortunate enough to interview Stefan Sagmeister at Off Festival the other year, and I grew up with Stefan's work on my walls at university. And I think the reason I had Stefan's work on my walls, as well as other great designers, was that interdisciplinary kind of not quite sure where they sit. Are they an artist? Are they a designer? Well, I don't really think it matters. I think it's what you're making, why, and where those references are coming from. And I think that if more people can get access to that way of thinking, then we live at an exciting time because we have access to a lot of human history.
Absolutely, more than ever. You can type and find almost anything. There's, so many resources and libraries and physical places. I love to, look through archives. In New York, we have the New York Public Library, which has this massive, image, library. Basically, it's a bunch of file cabinets, and you just pull them open and you find images and ads and old, newspapers and things. And it's so, exciting and inspiring, and to find things that, maybe people haven't seen in 20 years and, make something from that, right?
Yeah, I think things are cyclical, and there's, it's that whole idea of, is there anything truly original? I don't know, maybe not, but remixing, remaking, remodeling, transforming. This has always been at the core of great things. I saw a video recently of Zane Lowe interviewing Damon Albarn, and Damon pulled out an old keyboard and hit the kind of preset one tune, and it was the beat from Clint Eastwood by Gorillaz. Dun, 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 dun. And as Zane loyally fell down. He's like, "No, that's just preset." He's like, "Yeah, wholesale. We just took the tune and we just ran with it." And he's like,
Yeah.
but I love that. It's almost piracy in it. And then, again, that's exciting to me. There's something very punk about that. And I
Mhm.
think that I'd like to break that kind of paradox, or at least be a part of that, breaking that thing that we do live in this time with all this abundance. But in some ways, that is quite, I don't know, it's paralyzing in some ways, because it's almost too much. Our brains can't handle the sheer amount of things. So
Mhm.
then you have to get back into scarcity. But that's, I guess, going way off track. But I'm interested in your, running like an entertainment studio idea. Could you elaborate on that? I'm curious about what you mean. Justin's approach draws on the cultural arts and research-led design to emulate the mindset of an entertainment studio.
So I think the question really was about Apple and the work that they've been doing recently and my work with them, working on a number of their film series. I worked on something called Underdogs, and, obviously they have a whole TV platform, right? And I think what's so interesting, I mean, broadly speaking about Apple, not specifically for my work, but is that they are very committed and interested in showing up to people where they are, right? And providing the things that are already, kind of engaging to them in their lives. They make a television, right? So it was sort of a logical step for them to produce the content that people were engaging in. And it really became an opportunity for them to create really high quality, actually, deep, provocative, engaging programming for people to watch, basically for, as a side project, people like to say, right? Apple is a technology company. They make consumer electronics, they make phones and computers, but there's a whole film studio that wins, Academy Awards and Emmys and things like that. And it's really because the culture is not in the device, right? The culture is not in your phone, it's not in the laptop, it's in what you're doing with it. And so a lot of the perspective of, Apple Creative is in providing things that are interesting to people, right? That might make them go, huh, and just later in their days, do something great, right? There's, like we spoke about, that inspiration comes from everywhere. And uh, things like Apple TV and the Underdog series, these are the ways that we're engaging with audiences, particularly new audiences. The MacBook Neo just launched for a totally new uh, demographic of people where, they're seeing a lot of middle school students getting their first laptops now, and also, people on the other end, your grandparents who don't know how to use their phones. And the way that they're showing up for every, segment of their audience is, really tailored. It's not just kind of, throwing things out into the universe. It's very carefully considered, and they want to make sure that they're showing up to people, in a way that's really authentic to the brand, but also meeting people in the channels that they're excited by, right? So, for example, the Neo that launched on TikTok, right? That's a space that Apple had never been before, and the content there was very, internet native. It wasn't the sort of polished, chrome, shiny, floating, computers that people are used to seeing in the MacBook ads, because it really wasn't for that type of, audience. It was for people that are really, these are working people, students, people that are figuring out, I want to be creative. How do I, start making my own beats on a laptop? Right. So there's this whole educational component of how they're bringing people into the ecosystem. That's really, I mean, for me now, really exciting to have been a part of. And I think a great way for, a company of that scale to make things that matter to people.
Yeah, and I think when you distill all that down, it's listening, isn't it? It's listening and being attentive, and
Mhm.
actually, you said it well, meeting people where they are, and I think that that is critical to everything we do, whether it's in visual communication, entertainment, or behaving as a multitude of things.
Mhm.
Um, I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of leadership in our current moment, because would you agree that this role that you've taken has a large degree of leadership?
Yes. It's, I mean, leadership has changed so much over the years. When I first started, my leaders looked totally different than the people I'm working with now. I mean, recently we've had so many changes, not just technologically, but COVID pushed a lot of work remote. We have people now working from all sorts of different places. How you operate as a leader, over Zoom boxes is very different from how you would operate in an office space or in a studio. Um, I think it does come down to being a good listener, like always being a good listener, always keeping your door open, responding to feedback, identifying areas where things, seem a little tense or, are not as productive as they should be, and having really transparent conversations about what that means for the way that you communicate with your teams, the way that you work with them. Everybody has very different styles, particularly in creative. Some people are very much, let's jump into this and brainstorm. And then there are some people that are like, I need a minute. I need to think about this. I need to process. I need to take a walk around. And so, listening to your teams and understanding what their needs are from you as a leader is really the heart of, what it is to be a good leader. All of the best supervisors and creative directors and GCDs and, heads of marketing were really just kind of down to earth people that were there in the room with you, right? They weren't kind of, overlords looking above from the glass office. And, they come to you and they ask, what do you need? How can I enable you to do your best work here?
Yeah, trust, real trust. And I always think back to college and I studied graphic design and then switched to illustration. But when I was studying graphic design, I noticed that the best teachers were the ones who knew how to change between individuals and meet their needs. I remember getting my ass completely kicked for going back to this rigid drawing style that many of us show up with,
Mhm.
perfectionism and trying to keep everything tight as we think equates to good at that age, or maybe even later sometimes. And I remember getting a complete dressing down, swearing, there all sorts going on, but I loved it, and it forced a response. And I later realised when I saw the same teachers sat down very gently, very quietly, whispering to other students because they wouldn't have been able to take that in the same way. And it gave me so much
Mhm.
respect for them because I realised that they'd taken my individual traits into consideration to take a risk and to kick my ass and get a response that they hoped I would garner. But to see them doing the opposite with someone completely different, that is great leadership.
Mhm. Yeah. It really is about planning, I think. Design, so much of it is about planning, but the way that you work with an organization requires a lot of sort of forethought, listening, and responding, right? And it's quick sometimes. Sometimes you have to really pick on very, kind of small details that give you a sense of who a person is and how they can be pushed to do their best work and to feel most comfortable in this space.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, that holistic approach is glorious. When you see that running well, I've seen it in many many studios, and it's no surprise they're the successful ones. They're the ones whose leaders are in awe of their juniors. They're curious. What are they going to bring to the table today, and how can I enable that? Not how can I strangle everything and make it my name over the door. And there's enough of
Yeah.
that going on, but
Yeah.
I do think that there's I've certainly noticed over the course of doing this podcast a raise in awareness of that. In terms of AIGA, are you working as part of a team? Like, what's the remit, and are you are you able to kind of
Yes.
sit down and go? Yeah, what is it? What programs do you run? Who do you work with on a week to week, day to day basis? What does that look like?
Yes. Yeah. So at AIGA New York, we have basically one full-time staff member, our executive director, Stacy. She's going to listen to this when it comes out. So shout out to Stacy. And she, for the past, close to 20 years, has been at the helm of the organization, sort of leading it through many presidents before me, you know, design greats over the years, who sort of shaped the short-term vision of the operations. But it is a large board of directors that are, it's a volunteer board, right? And they are coming from all sorts of design leadership positions, strategy, all of these places within the design industry. Some of them are educators at schools. It's close to 30 people this year, which is, really large. One of the largest boards we've had in recent years. And so coming in as the president, I am working with all 30 of these board members basically in different groups to um, produce all of the work that we do. So on a, work group level, there's the executive group, which, has our VP of finance and our VP of programming and grants and partnerships and things like that. But really, where I came from originally was in a work group. I came from education, so I spent the past 3 years on the education work group working on programming initiatives, things for the emerging design community, as well as career changers and people that are, coming out of grad school programs. We do things like portfolio reviews and job fairs and career development programs. And we did this program called the Faculty Finder, which helps pair people that are interested in engaging with teaching for the first time, sending all of their information into this database that we then were able to share with our partners at schools, right? So we work with a lot of universities, design schools in the tri-state area to give them that sort of equitable pathway into teaching. And we just did this this past year. And within the work group, you have, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 people, and everybody comes in and they pitch their ideas, and you say, okay, well, we've never done that before, but that's something that we need, and let's figure out how to do it. Right. And I really kind of thrive in that kind of area where you just kind of, figure stuff up, and it's a little bit messy at first, but you work out all the kinks and you discover things and you know, find the real solutions that answer the needs of your community. So, that's what I did on education. I've been the lead for 2 years and now stepping into the president. There are two other main work groups. We have the programming work group, which um, puts together all of our events. We have a really robust events calendar with panels and talks and presentations and more community group meetups, where people just come together to a bar one day after work and hang out and talk about a theme and commiserate their problems, in a way that we probably haven't seen for a few years pre-pandemic. And then the last work group is mentorship, which is now, kind of expanded into what we've called growth. Originally, it was the mentorship program started 2018, 2019, something like that. That was mostly for emerging designers. We've paired, I think, close to 4,000 pairs over the years. And then we set them up with a mentor who is, an established professional in the field. We have, big names on there. We've got pentagram partners, associate partners, paired with, you know, junior design students, right? People that have never, worked before but are looking to build their skills and their communication skills and their craft and their thinking about the industry and bringing that to somebody who knows, who's lived it, who's in it right now, to help them learn all these things that they're not necessarily learning at school or haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to. So that's expanded recently into a more advanced career program, which is really exciting, which is all ready for the people that have been, in the workforce, sorry, for 15, 20 years. These are already design directors, they're leaders, they're looking to build their community. They're looking to see, what's the next step for me? Is it starting a studio? How does one start a studio? Right? That knowledge is really kind of held by, the people that have done it. So we're also pairing up those people and they're sharing at, very high level, not necessarily how are you tweaking your portfolio necessarily, but the real um, communication challenges and business challenges and career challenges that come with taking the next steps as a working professional. So that's something that we've done, I think, about 2 years now, and there's been great response to it. And we're really um, excited. I'm honored to be leading this really incredible board in all of these efforts that really targets and supports design at all stages of the career, right? As they're coming in, while they're in school, as they leave school, when they're first starting out, a couple of years, first 5, 10 years, when they're working professionals and they're trying to figure out what's next, when they've been in the career now 25, 30 years and they're looking to give back, right? We provide, the network. We bring all these people together, we get them convene and um, really emphasize the importance of community to designers.
I think it's maybe it's the most important thing in the world we live in today. I don't know. I think there's a danger with the sheer abundance of scattered resources that if you think back to when, we didn't know anything and we came into this very naive, I think it's really important to have centralized resources and access to things like programs and events and in-person meetups because when you do it's real. I'll never forget the first guest speakers we had on my illustration degree. We got Tom Gold in, and I'll never forget him sitting there at the front and just thinking, he's a real life illustrator. My God, he's human. He's 3D. I can see him right here in front of me. You know,
Mhm.
it was an incredible feeling, and it just made it more tangible, and it made me want to make it happen. And I see that that ripple effect. I think the link up thing with schools is a beautiful idea. I was on the AIG website and you're looking at the design directory. Simple but very
Mhm.
easy to overlook. A simple list of things, agencies you can access, not only for the agencies to be found, but for the people out there to see what this landscape looks like and to make it real. COVID, like you said, was a big hit on all of that stuff, and I'm seeing a growing appetite now in this, and I think we've all felt the digital fatigue. It seems like a thing where we're reaching this crescendo now as humans where we're overloaded and overwhelmed. So actually, like you said, to step in there and share a problem or speak to someone a bit further down the line, it's essential. We're social creatures.
Mhm. And so many of these like interactions, are not necessarily part of the events that we do, but they happen in the spaces in between. Some of my favorite things that I see is, we'll have an event, right? The speaker will do their presentation, there'll be a Q&A, right? It's pretty traditional event format, but what happens afterwards, the designer will come off the stage, they'll stand in the crowd, people will come up, they'll ask questions. They start talking about, oh my gosh, I saw this thing that you did, and, hey, I had this question about this. They're pulling out their phones, they're showing them this, they're working out things right in the auditorium. And I think that's so special that we're able to facilitate that, just by having people come together, right? We had a portfolio review where one of the reviewers, he's a design director at A24, and, one of the other, um, you know, reviewers was a pentagram partner, and he was like, oh, come over, you got to see this kid's work, right? And so 2 days later after the review, I get an email from the team saying, hey, we actually loved seeing this person's work, we're hiring this summer, could you maybe put us in contact, we'd love to talk to them about an internship. And that wasn't in the scope of the portfolio review. That wasn't the point of the portfolio review. It was really for feedback and, advancing the work. But this person, got this opportunity just from showing up and being in that room, and the generosity of our partners and reviewers and the people who volunteered to be there to say, oh, let's take this a step further. How do we really make this super valuable for everybody involved and, you know, walk away with opportunities for more in the future?
Yes, and I love what you said there about just working out in the auditorium. I think that hits the nail on the head because it's what we do.
Mhm.
Where we when we say creative, the mind tends to default to an art form, but we're just creative creatures. We do. You put people in an environment, and there's this organic thing that happens. Someone has a conversation with a person they didn't know exist, and it's just things spark, things snowball. And I think that as an organization, there's only so much you can do, especially with a volunteer board. Therefore, you have to, it goes back to what we said about leadership. You have to step off, trust, and create the space. And then, just steer, watch, steer. I think there's something beautiful about that process and very, it takes bravery to do that, but I think it always pays off.
For sure. I mean, I feel really blessed with the board that we have, and we have some new board members incoming. The board terms are about 2-ish years. Some people linger a little longer, but there's always this rotating group coming in and out, and you're always getting fresh perspective, then new ideas, and people that want to shape things in certain ways. And it's always interesting and exciting to see how that sort of shapes the fabric of what AIGA is for the community, and how we're showing up, where we're showing up, who's in the room, right? And we always try to get as many people in the room as possible from as many backgrounds as possible. It's really, we try to avoid this idea of design for designers, right? Because design is so much bigger. It's a conversation about culture, really. It's about all of the things that you're engaged in. It's about television shows, right? It's about sports, right? Right now we're in sports mania right now in New York. We know a big Knicks game, and we had, the World Cup is happening over here, so everybody's really all in on that. We just, in the last 2 weeks we were like, okay, you know what? We need to put something together for this, and we threw an event on the calendar for next month where we're going to have, one of the designer of the New York City World Cup tourism campaign. She's going to come on and she's going to talk about what that process looks like. Um, and it was so fast. We like literally we had to call our venue partners. We were like, "Hey, listen, we know it's a short turnaround, but this is what people are really demanding right now. There's so much excitement for it." And so we're responding to that in real time, which is very, cool and unique, I would say, uh, to be able to provide for people. Quite a thrill.
Absolutely, and to have the because I think that was one of the problems, perhaps for maybe for a little while, was that organisations struggle to move on their feet in the same way that an individual might be able to be responsive in the way that you just described. So that's very exciting and encouraging to hear. Actually, that there is that responsive flexibility.
You know, all the props to the board, right?
Yeah, you strike me as a doer, as an optimist. Would I be anywhere near the mark with that?
I think so. I mean, I think that's really why, at the heart of it, I do this. I think there's a lot of tension in the industry right now, and a lot of, perhaps cynicism or negativity about the direction of the industry and the work and the people involved. I have seen, in my experience, that the future of design actually, particularly with the emerging design population, is really exciting. It's really bright. There's a lot of hunger for a lot of the same stuff that we were excited about when we were first starting, craft and, making things right and solving problems. What's changing is sort of the mechanisms of that, right? The studio structures are different. The tools that they're using are different. And for a lot of people that have been in the industry for some time, that's, really kind of earth-shattering, ground-moving, that we have to sort of adjust the way that we work and we think about the industry to fit this new paradigm of creativity. But that's part of what I see my role as being, right? Helping people connect those dots, making sure that we're all in a space of readiness to adapt, and also making sure that we're really holding on to those core principles of humanity and empathy and things like humor and attitude and, you know, passion in the work that we're doing. Right. And I think what gets lost in so many of these conversations is that passion, right? People start to feel like design is more of a job, right? It's a job kind of job, right? You show up, you do the thing, and then you go home and you do what you like afterwards, right? Because so many people have lost that spark, that fire. And even just bringing people together, you can kind of sometimes see, that spark reignite. You see how sharing ideas and sharing space together uh, motivates people to do something. Maybe it's not what's happening at their day job. Maybe it's a little passion project, a side project. And, I'm not saying, hustle culture, you have to be working all day, but I do think that it's important for designers to make design that they feel good about, right? At the end of the day, you have to live with the work you've done, right? And nobody wants to, go to bed thinking, you know, that was just kind of a dumb spreadsheet that I worked on, right? So filling in those gaps to do things that actually excite you and shaping your career in a way that positions you to do the things that make you happy, that make you excited, that make you feel fulfilled at the end of the day, that enable you to, support the causes and the individuals and the communities that you are a supporter of. Um, like that's what we do. That's what I do.
Yeah, yes. I mean, resounding yes to everything you said, because I think that creativity is ultimately an extension of self. And if we don't nourish that, you know, I termed it when I wrote my second book on creativity, the creative condition. I termed it as the wilting flower. I think it's like caring for a plant. If we don't at least give it that little water, a little sunlight here and there, then it does wilt. It might come back as something new down the line, but I think that ultimately we have to do that. We owe it to ourselves. And as you said, hustle culture and all that, there's only so much we can do. But I think, and I love this Japanese phrase that I came across called seikatsu sha, which is loosely translates to those who live by doing or being the author of your own life. I think that's what we have to be. We have to be brave enough to shape it and to take risks here and there to make time for the things that matter to us. Because that I've seen it over 20 years now, and I know people who've seen it over 40 and 50 years, but it creates those moments we talked about that happens in the room in an auditorium, that serendipity, when you talk about those things that you're passionate about and that you do care about within your profession, your craft. I've seen time and time again, it has a resonance that is infectious and does open doors and does lead to the next thing and the next thing. And don't get me wrong, on the bad days, and this is why I asked about the optimism, I don't feel that. And then that's when I get sucked into this vortex of going, oh my God, I'm just doing my commercial work again. And it's like, woe is me. I enjoy my commercial work, so there are no complaints there. But, I love to write fiction. I like to do these podcasts. I've always been a moonlighter and love to go and do all those other things. But on the good days, this is truly my life's cause. I made a decision recently I say recently, maybe about 5 years ago. I was feeling the weight of the world too much, everything from the environmental crisis to wars and everything else, to the point where I thought I can't be all things to all people. And as a sensitive person, I feel like I need a cause, I need some direction so that I can contribute to something. And I said to myself, well, have you not spent the last 10 years championing creativity and interviewing people and helping younger people in the industry? Yes. Is that, are we not going to need creativity for any relevant cause in the world? Yes. Okay. Stick to that thing,
Yeah,
and that is what gets me out of bed on a good day. And there's magic in that.
for sure. Congratulations. I mean, it's so special to find you know, that calling, to recognize the calling and to respond to it. I mean, this series is, fantastic and, excited to be on. But, for you as an individual to have this experience that you're fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're doing the thing that that is right for you.
Absolutely, but what is even more exciting to me, and always was from the moment of stepping into art college, was the community aspect of that. So it massively heartens me and my cause, to see you and your cause, to see AIGA, to see DNAD in the UK, to look around me and go, actually, when you add all this up, we can make a difference. And I think so many of us need to feel that in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. Community all the way.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I mean, this has been fantastic, Justin, and I appreciate your time. Where can people keep up to, up with AIGA and what's going on next?
We're on Instagram, AIGA NY. Our website's always up to date. Sign up for our newsletter, and we, put out weekly emails about all the things that are exciting and coming up and events that you should come to. Whatever our next World Cup event is, you'll hear about it there. But we really are. It's sort of an open door, right? Our emails are on the website. You can contact us on Instagram. We are excited to hear from the community what their needs are, the things that they're interested in, what their concerns are, and really respond to that and kind of help them, solve these problems and be a little bit less, afraid to do what they want to do. So, email us, let us know, show up to our events. We'd love to see everybody. And just, celebrate the community.
Yeah, so what we all need to do in this moment. So great to hear how it's going on. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much to Justin Wong for taking the time to have this wonderful conversation. Today, Justin is the new president of AIGA New York, and he's helping to champion the future of design for all. I love all that. The community stuff is so important for me, and I'm getting a little more of it bit by bit by being involved with things. I'm volunteering on a new program called the Creative Compass here in Salisbury. We're trying to raise the awareness of the broadest sense of creativity for high school, secondary school students, years 7 to 9. That's exciting. Part of a group doing that called Endless Street here, formed by Dan Kieran, who you might remember from back on the show, I think around maybe episode, I can't remember, you'll have to find it. Look him up. But I'm a part of that. I'm trying to get to London more. I'm having beers with people, lunches. I am doing the coaching, I'm writing, and it's bringing collaborative projects, and it feels amazing because I spend way too much time alone, and I don't get the fullness of my creativity when that's the case. I know it's the same for many of us in this industry, and I hope this conversation with Justin has given you a reminder of how powerful it can be by just being under the same roof with people. Talking next week about becoming the author of the life you want to lead at a personal experience on holiday, and want to share that with you. I think it's going to be helpful. So check back in, subscribe to the show on your chosen preferred platform. If you get a second, I would love it if you could review the show. Pop a little rating on there if you like what we're up to here, and tell a friend, because it's such a powerful word of sharing podcasts and getting them out there. Thanks for listening, guys. Check out the founding sponsor of the show who bring you this podcast, illustrationx.com, representing the world's best illustrators. You can see their global range of illustration, animation, and art portfolios now at that very website. Doing a lot in our industry too around legislation, around AI and the likes, and intellectual property. They're always fighting hard on behalf of visual communicators. So big pat on the back to those guys. Fileco.com, the widest range of hot stamping files in the world, I do believe. Incredible environmental credentials, family-run business in the northwest of the UK for your book covers, for your zines, for your business cards, for your prints. They're incredible foilers, and their index is something to behold. If you join their mailing list, I believe you get a copy of the index printed version so you can see all those gorgeous files. Get on it. It's amazing. paradisoinstitute.org, incredible leadership things now, calling for bold, brave leadership in the creative industry, helping to achieve that through coaching programs, through seminars, through festivals, and getting people together in the way that Justin and I have talked about today. paradisoinstitute.org. And of course, they're the brilliant Ukrainian Institute, championing the bold, brave, creative community in Ukraine in this time of war. If you want to work one-to-one with me on the coaching, get in touch, ben at bentallon.com. Otherwise, all the resources for every budget at thecreativecondition.com. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a magic week, and we'll chat soon.